All right, so we have done a chart for the culminating writing task. We're doing for the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. You know that you're going to have to choose from three options, and you're going to have to write a narrative or a story. I'm imagining that our assignment is that we have to write the opening of chapter 2 of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, where Lucy first meets Mr. Tumnus, and we're writing that scene from Mr. Tumnus's point of view. And I found a way to upload that chart that we made into a document. Here we go. And so remember, on the outside, we outlined all the major events that happen in chapter 2. Lucy meets Mr. Tumnus. He confirms that Lucy is a daughter of Eve. Tumnus tells Lucy a little bit about Narnia. He doesn't understand where she's from. Tumnus invites Lucy to his home for tea and refreshments. Okay, and then we have my badly drawn umbrella because that's the end of that scene. Then on the inside here, we have Tumnus's senses. He sees what appears to be a girl. He thinks he hears her, but he's dropped his parcels in the snow and he's picking them up. We also have, I have here, he's holding the hand of a daughter of Eve. Now, I actually went back and looked at the scene because I was thinking to myself, wait a minute, if he has the umbrella and he's holding things, he couldn't be holding her hand. So I got that wrong. That's why it's always good to go back to the text. She takes his arm, but you could still maybe have that, this creature, this daughter of Eve, this human that he's never met before, is holding onto his arm, and how odd that might feel, or how nice it might feel because she seems to be a friendly person. Maybe you include that, maybe you don't. It's up to you. Okay, and then we also look at what's going on with his thoughts. When he tells Lucy about Narnia, I have his thoughts being, I know I should bring this girl to the queen, or at least tell the queen about her. And then he wonders what will happen to her as she's talking about where she's from. And then right before, or right around the time he invites her back to his home, he's saying that she's friendly and he doesn't want her to get hurt. Okay, so we have all these ideas. All right, and so here's where we're going to actually write this out. Now, when you're doing a narrative, you have to have the beginning, the middle, and the end because it's a story. The idea is to include all the major points of your story and all the details and things that you've worked out, and then to proofread it, and we'll talk a bit about that once we do that. But let's go ahead and do the culminating. So I've got my chart, I've got my text, and I've got my document where I'm going to write it. Okay, so we start off with Lucy meeting Mr. Tumnus. Oh, also remember, according to the instructions on the culminating writing task, we're writing in first person. So it's Mr. Tumnus using I, me, we language. It's his point of view, and we're going to write it in first person. Okay, so I could hardly believe my eyes, but it appeared that before me was a young human. A young human girl. I was so startled. That should be my eyes. Excuse me. I was so startled that I dropped my parcels in the snow. As I bent down to pick them up, I thought I heard this strange creature speaking, but I was too distressed with my packages to hear what she said. Okay, so I'm just setting up in the beginning, and I got that just from my chart here where Lucy meets Mr. Tumnus. If I didn't remember exactly what happened, then I would go back to the text. When I collected my things, I finally asked the girl if she was human. She seemed surprised by the question, but she confirmed that she was in fact a girl, a real life daughter of Eve. Okay, I go back to my chart. So he's confirmed. Let's see. Now I was going to tell her about Narnia. The girl asked where this place was, and I had to tell her that she was in Narnia. As I told her about how it is always winter here, never summer, I remembered what I was supposed to do if ever I encountered a human creature such as she. Sorry, such as her. I'm doing this all kind of just on in my mind, so sometimes my grammar's a little off. So it's good with proofreading. Okay, so as I'm thinking about the queen. Okay, I know that the queen, I guess we can capitalize it. I know that the queen has ordered that I alert her to any human child, son or daughter, son of Adam or daughter of Eve that I meet. This girl called Lucy tells me about her strange homeland in Spare where it is always sunlight and summer. And you say, well, where did we get this? This is his misinterpretation. Yeah, sunny, I guess, would go better. Sunny and summer. So this is his interpretation of what she's saying. Okay, so I'm literally just following the chart. I have the chart up there, and I have my chart. I have it in my lap, and I'm just kind of looking at it, or I'm going back on the screen. And you see me doing that. I'm just kind of following along with this. This is my rough draft, and getting all this down for the narrative. And so I've done the beginning. I've done most of the middle. Now I'm gonna kind of wrap it up here. Okay. And I have on my chart, he wonders what will happen to her. I wonder to myself what the queen will do to this girl, knowing full well it won't be pleasant for Lucy. I invite Lucy back to my home for tea. And although she seems unsure, I convince her to come have refreshments at my home. At my, and see, I can't remember quite if he lived in a cave or not, so I'm going to go back to my text and look. Where does he live? Let's see, the hills, turned aside. Yeah, he lives in a cave. So have come refreshments. How about we do this back to my cave and then home over here? Have refreshments in my home. Okay, so I'm looking at the chart. Let's see. She's really nice. Okay. Lucy is so friendly and kind. I hope that she doesn't get hurt because of me. And let's see. I tell her to take my arm as I cover us with the umbrella, and off we go. We go. Off we go together. All right. Okay, so I have written kind of my draft. I've used my chart. I need to proofread it. One thing about doing it with Google Docs is that oftentimes Google checks my mistakes before I have a chance to read over it myself. But that's an important thing to do. Go back over it. I also tell students, if they feel like a lot of times in a rough draft, they feel like they haven't added enough dialogue, enough conversation. If there's conversation in the text, maybe to add that in. And then the one thing that my students struggle with, and I admit when I'm writing by hand, a narrative with my students or in front of my students, I struggle with, and that is, look at this text. It's one big blob, right? There's no paragraphs. It's just a big blob of text. And normally we, as I've mentioned in other places, we do this unit in January and February after we probably have written 15 essays together, both from the books that we're reading and then also other articles that we have. And we've written a lot together, but almost entirely essays. And so we know where our paragraphs are supposed to be with the introduction and the body paragraphs and conclusion. We know what those look like and we know the format. But narrative, it's just like, boom, this big blob of text. So what I tell students to do, I give them two options. One is to go to the scene that they've written. So this would be the scene right here. And I might say, find where you see some breaks in the text and make a paragraph. So like maybe make a paragraph with this scene. Maybe make a paragraph with this part here. Okay. Another thing I might have them do is look at their chart where they have their graphic organizer and ask yourself, okay, here's the beginning, here's the middle, and then this part over here is the end. Okay. That might not make the most sense. So I have right here my chart. So I might say, okay, Lucy meets Mr. Tumnus. He confirms that she's a daughter of Eve. Okay, that's part one. And then where he tells her about Narnia and a little bit about where she's from, that's like part two. That's my middle. And then where he invites her back to his home, that's the third part. That's the end. Beginning, middle, and end. And you can find those scenes in your narrative, and you can make those the break for your paragraphs. And if you're typing, it's just real easy because you put your cursor and you hit enter and tab, and then you have a new paragraph. So that's also something else you can do. Another thing is anytime there's dialogue, if you type dialogue, that means you type a conversation. Anytime characters have a conversation, wherever that conversation begins, you can make that a separate paragraph, just as they have in the book. So it's just kind of figuring those things out. But a lot of times that's what happens as students, and I do this too. We're so used to, we know how to do an essay, but when we're writing a narrative, we just end up kind of writing the story, and it just goes into this big blob of text. And then when you're ready for your final draft, or if you're typing in a Word document and you've proofread and you feel like, okay, this is the text, then go make your paragraph breaks. That's what I suggest. And because as fifth graders, you'll be doing the leap on the computer, that's a good thing to learn to do, is to get the information down if you have to do a narrative, and then to make your paragraphs after. If you're doing an essay, you'll know how to do the paragraphs. But for some reason with narratives, and I do this even as a teacher, as an adult, is have this big, massive blob of text. And so we want to make a couple little paragraphs there. So I'm going to make this a paragraph here. Sorry, what did I do? There we go. And okay, so now I have a couple little paragraphs. The one thing I might do is if I have enough time, because sometimes you have a timed writing and sometimes you have like multiple days to work on something, I would go back and I would probably try to add a little more conversation or dialogue in. We can do that right now. Let's see. So I might change this to, let's go back to the text. Let's find where she actually, so I might have him do this part here. How have you come to Narnia? And see, I realize we're going to the text. This is probably in the best sentence right here. So I asked the girl how she came to Narnia. Let's see. Take that out. I'm going to make this a new paragraph. Hit enter and tab. I asked the girl how she came to Narnia. Then I want to have this exact. Narnia, what's that? She looked at me confused and asked, Narnia. I think there's a comma. Yeah. No. Narnia, question mark. What's that? And so I now have added a little, and you notice it looks a little bit more like a story. And you see they do that here where they have these different lines of dialogue. So that's something you can do if you have a little bit more time. And now I went from having this big blob of text, I have something that looks a little bit more like a story. And the only thing I always tell my students with narrative, in some years I have students who struggle with it, and some years I have students who love doing narrative, is that it's just like we do with essays or anything else. The more you practice it, the better you'll kind of get a feel for actually doing it. Writing stories is something that a lot of people like to do on their own, but they find that they don't usually include so much dialogue. They usually just describe what's happening without showing the characters actually speaking to each other. And it's just practice to get better at writing a narrative. But we've done it. We took our culminating writing task. We pretended that the assignment was from chapter 2. We did a graphic organizer to get all our thoughts together. We had the text with us in case we had to refer back to it, and we did. And then we wrote our culminating writing task. We can do this. So what you need to do is think about the skills that we've done here. If there's any parts you don't understand or you need to refresh, go back and watch the video. Or if you need to look at the video where we did this, go back and watch that again. And start thinking about how you're going to do your culminating writing task for The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and do the same process, and you'll do wonderfully. It's a skill that I feel that we all have within us, because we can all tell a story that we've heard before in a new way, and just follow that process, and you'll do great. All right, that's it for now.